The 1st of September, 1939. Nazi Germany invades Poland, which marks the beginning of the Second World War. In March 1940, Adolf Hitler approves the creation of a special combat unit to fight partisans in mountainous areas. This unit will consist of convicted criminals, psychopaths, sexual deviants, and murderers of the worst degree, and will become known as the most brutal and notorious Waffen-SS unit, with its soldiers described as the ideal genocidal killers. In Poland and Belarus, members of the unit will torture, rape, and murder tens of thousands of civilians without distinction of age or sex. Their commander is Oskar Dirlewanger. Oscar Dirlewanger was born on the 26th of September 1895 in the Bavarian city of Würzburg, then part of the German Empire. His father August was a wealthy merchant, and his mother Paulina was a housewife. In 1906, the family moved to the town of Esslingen am Neckar, where young Oskar spent much of his childhood. On the 1st of October 1913, Dirlewanger enlisted in the Württemberg Army, which was part of the Imperial German Army and served as a machine gunner. The First World War began on the 28th of July 1914. Dirlewanger was sent to the Western Front, where he took part in the German invasion of Belgium and later fought in France. He was wounded 6 times, and even though he was classified as 40% disabled, he voluntarily reported back to the front. He received the Iron Cross Second and First Class and served on the Eastern Front in southern Russia and Romania. In November 1918, at the time of Germany's surrender, he held a rank of lieutenant. The same month, Dirlewanger's battalion was supposed to be interned in Romania, but Dirlewanger decided to return his unit to Germany and led 600 men from his company and other battalion units home, which earned him praise from other comrades. However, the front experiences had a damaging effect on Dirlewanger's personality, and after the war, he was described as mentally unstable, a violent fanatic and alcoholic who had the habit of erupting into violence under the influence of drugs. In the new Weimar Republic, which was the name given to the German government from 1918 to 1933, Oskar Dirlewanger joined various Freikorps right-wing paramilitary militias, which fought against communists and other groups they believed were responsible for German defeat. In 1921, while serving with one of the Freikorps units, Dirlewanger was shot in the head. The same year, he was expelled from the business school in Mannheim, where he studied economics, and he then continued studies in Frankfurt am Main, where in 1922 he received his doctorate in political science. In his doctoral thesis titled Critique of the Idea of a Planned Management of the Economy, he dealt with questions of a national planned economy in the event of a future war, in order to avoid the supply crisis that occurred during the First World War. In October 1922, Dirlewanger joined the Nazi Party, and soon after its paramilitary organization, the SA. From 1928 to 1931, he was managing director of the textile factory in the city of Erfurt. The factory belonged to a Jewish family, and Dirlewanger was accused of several cases of embezzlement with which he supported the Nazi SA, and then worked as a self-employed tax consultant. In 1933, after the Nazi seizure of power, Dirlewanger was rewarded by being made director of the Heilbronn Employment Agency, a strategic post for local-level Nazi leaders. However, Dirlewanger's comments about other old fighters, whom he accused of lacking qualifications and being corrupt, led to an internal SA disciplinary procedure. Old fighters were the earliest members of the Nazi Party, who joined it before the 1930 German federal election, thanks to which the Nazis dramatically increased their number of seats in the Reichstag, the German parliament, from 12 to 107. As a result of the proceedings, several criminal charges against Dirlewanger that had previously been suppressed were pursued. In 1934, he was convicted not only of driving and damaging a government vehicle under the influence of alcohol, but also the rape of a 13-year-old girl from the League of German Girls, and the molestation of other underage girls. The pedophile Oskar Dirlewanger was sentenced to 2 years in prison and lost his position, his doctorate, and all his military decorations. After his release from 2 years' imprisonment in Ludwigsburg Penitentiary, he was again put on trial in 1936 for embezzling funds in the Erfurt textile factory and was subsequently sent to the Welsheim concentration camp. However, he was soon released after the intervention of his friend Gottlob Berger, a longtime personal friend of Heinrich Himmler, the leader of the SS. Berger and Dirlewanger had served in the same regiment during the First World War and had worked together to covertly arm the Nazi Party in southwestern Germany. Between 1936 and 1939, Oskar Dirlewanger fought in the Condor Legion, which was a German military unit sent to Spain to support General Franco's nationalist movement during the Spanish Civil War. It was a great opportunity for Nazi Germany to test and develop methods of strategic bombing, which were soon used during the Second World War. Dirlewanger was wounded 3 times, and after his return, thanks to his bravery in Spain and intervention of his patron Gottlob Berger, he was again allowed to join the Nazi Party and regain his doctorate. The Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939, and in July of the following year, Dirlewanger was admitted to the SS. He created and trained a special criminal unit named the Dirlewanger Brigade, which at that time consisted mostly of convicted poachers serving their sentences in the Sachsenhausen concentration camp near Berlin. They were recruited thanks to their tracking and shooting skills in order to fight partisans and received 2 months of training. In the autumn of 1940, the unit consisted of around 80 men. At first, the unit was sent to German-occupied Poland, where Dirlewanger became a commandant of a camp at Stary Dzików, which was set up for Jewish slave labor. They committed atrocities here, as well as at the Lublin ghetto. Dirlewanger would often rape children, whether boy or girl, and then shoot them afterwards. The Jewish girls which Dirlewanger raped were taken away and shot by his men, so they could not report him or testify. The SS judge and lawyer Georg Konrad Morgan, who investigated the conduct of Dirlewanger, testified after the war saying, "Dirlewanger had arrested people illegally and arbitrarily, and as for his female prisoners, young Jewesses, he did the following against them. He called together a small circle of friends consisting of members of a Wehrmacht supply unit. Then he made so-called scientific experiments, which involved stripping the victims of their clothing. Then, the victims were given an injection of strychnine. Dirlewanger looked on, smoked a cigarette, as did his friends, and they saw how these girls were dying. Immediately after, the corpses were cut into small pieces, mixed with horse meat, and boiled down into soap." The atrocities committed by Dirlewanger included whipping and burning the intimate parts of the women he abused with a petrol lighter. Heinrich Himmler, as well as Dirlewanger's patron and friend Gottlob Berger, knew about these atrocities and tolerated them. After the war, Berger said, "Dr. Dirlewanger was hardly a good boy, you can't say that, but he was a good soldier, and he had one big mistake that he didn't know when to stop drinking." From his men, Dirlewanger demanded unconditional obedience, and if there was a breach of discipline, he did not hesitate to beat them with clubs or shoot them. His men called him a butcher, and one of his punishments included the so-called Dirlewanger coffin, in which a soldier could be locked up in a narrow box for days. The aforementioned SS judge Georg Konrad Morgan accused Dirlewanger of wanton acts of murder and corruption. The dissolution of the unit was considered, and Dirlewanger himself was supposed to stand before the SS court in the case of the so-called race defilement for rapes against Jewish women, but ultimately none of this came to fruition. Instead, in February 1942, the Dirlewanger Brigade was sent to Belarus. By the end of 1942, the brigade had a total strength of about 750 men, and was also provided with artillery and cars for faster movement. In July 1943, it was even reinforced by over 300 men from the concentration camps of Dachau, Sachsenhausen, and Mauthausen. Whereas before the unit had been composed almost exclusively of poachers, this time it included criminals of all kinds, serving sentences for murder, assault, armed robbery, rape, as well as antisocial elements and psychopaths. The members of the Dirlewanger's brigade raped and tortured young women and killed at least 30,000 Belarusian civilians. Their specialty was to cram the local population inside a barn and set it on fire. Whoever tried to escape from the burning building was shot with a machine gun. In many villages, they murdered all their inhabitants. As with the Einsatzgruppen, which were Nazi mobile death squads operating behind the front line in Nazi-occupied Eastern Europe, Dirlewanger's unit made their victims, often naked, kneel down on the edge of a mass grave, and then shot them in the back of the neck. Then, the bodies dropped straight down into the pit. Rounded up civilians, mainly women and children, would also routinely be used as human shields and marched over minefields. A witness reported Dirlewanger's men roasting captured partisans alive, and then throwing their bodies to a herd of hungry pigs. When the atrocities committed by Dirlewanger's brigade reached the Marshal of the Soviet Union, Georgy Zhukov, he was so disgusted by their actions that he made Dirlewanger's liquidation a priority and put a bounty on his head. According to the report sent to Berlin, Dirlewanger's unit had destroyed 15,000 people labeled as bandits and captured 1,100 rifles and recorded 92 dead in their own ranks. However, the ratio of numbers shows that the Dirlewanger unit was mainly used to systematically murder unarmed civilians. On the 1st of August 1944, the Warsaw Uprising began, when the Polish Home Army, a non-communist underground resistance army with units stationed throughout German-occupied Poland, rose against the German occupation authorities in an effort to liberate Warsaw. The impetus for the uprising was the appearance of the Soviet forces along the east bank of the Vistula River. The Soviets, however, did not intervene. Dirlewanger led his 4,000 butchers, rapists, and looters into action against the Warsaw Uprising, and quickly committed such unspeakable crimes that both Army and SS commanders demanded the units withdraw. During the uprising, they also took part in the Wola massacre, during which more than 40,000 Poles were murdered in the Wola district of the Polish capital. This massacre was ordered by Adolf Hitler himself, who requested to kill anything that moves in order to stop the Warsaw Uprising. Dirlewanger's unit used women and children as living shields when attacking enemy positions. They burned 3 hospitals with patients inside. The nurses were whipped, gang-raped, and hanged naked together with the doctors. He did not have any mercy even with children, whom he personally raped, burnt alive, or threw alive to starving dogs. When Oskar Dirlewanger and his men found a daycare with 500 children inside, he ordered his men to kill every one of them, but because he wanted them to save their ammunition, they beat and stabbed the defenseless children to death with rifle butts and bayonets. Later, they drank, raped, and murdered their way through the old town, slaughtering civilians and fighters alike without distinction of age or sex. In the old town, where about 30,000 civilians were killed, several thousand wounded in field hospitals overrun by Germans were shot and set on fire with flamethrowers. The Germans eventually crushed the revolt and razed the center of the city to the ground in October 1944. 166,000 people lost their lives in the uprising, including perhaps as many as 17,000 Polish Jews who had either fought with the Polish Home Army or had been discovered in hiding. For his merits in the suppression of the uprising, Oskar Dirlewanger was promoted to the rank of SS Oberführer, the equivalent to a colonel in the British Army, and was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. On the 16th of October 1944, the head of the general government in Nazi-occupied Poland, Hans Frank, hosted a dinner in honor of Dirlewanger at Wawel Castle, where he expressed his gratitude and appreciation for the exemplary operations carried out by his group in the course of fighting in Warsaw. In October 1944, Dirlewanger and his men played a crucial role in a brutal suppression of the Slovak national uprising, which lasted 2 months from the 29th of August to the 28th of October 1944. On the 30th of October of the same year, Józef Tiso, president of the Slovak state and Catholic priest, personally decorated German soldiers who had fought in the uprising. The ceremony took place in Banská Bystrica in Slovakia, and one of the decorated was Oskar Dirlewanger. Dirlewanger later took part in fights against the advancing Red Army in Hungary and Germany. In February 1945, the unit was expanded again and redesigned as the 36th Waffen-Grenadier Division of the SS. That same month, Dirlewanger was shot in the chest while fighting against Soviet forces and sent to the rear. It was his 12th and final injury in the war. He had himself taken care of, and then tried to bring looted goods stored by his parents to safety before the end of the war. On the 22nd of April, 1945, he went into hiding in a remote hunting lodge in the village of Tannheim in Austrian Tyrol. However, on the 1st of June 1945, Oskar Dirlewanger was arrested. Although he had exchanged his uniform for civilian clothes and used a false name, he was recognized by a Jewish former concentration camp prisoner and brought to a detention center in German Altshausen. According to the testimony of Luftwaffe Lieutenant Anton Füssing, his cellmate and German prisoner of war, Dirlewanger was pulled out of the cell into the corridor every night and brutally beaten by the Polish guards. Füssing later testified, "I heard blows and terrible screams. In daylight, I would see bleeding open wounds on Dirlewanger's face, and his entire body was covered with bleeding welts." On the 7th of June, 1945, after days of immense torture and suffering, Dirlewanger was savagely beaten to death by Poles in revenge for his brutality in suppressing the Warsaw Uprising. He was 49 years old. Officially, he died of a heart attack. When Georgy Zhukov was told of the violent death of Oskar Dirlewanger, he responded, "Violent endings are fitting for violent men." After the war, there were rumors that Dirlewanger was alive and later served in the Egyptian army, which led to the exhumation of his remains in November 1960. Examination of the corpse confirmed that the remains belonged to Dirlewanger. There were no tears shed for Oskar Dirlewanger.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.